1.1 of investment. Another key performance metric is to collect all the lodging taxes that are due to the county. And through the pandemic, we did have some issues with collection, but following through on that, we did get collection from some of the motels and hotels that were struggling. But we weren't able to get into a lot of them because of the shutdown as well. So at the time in 2020, there was about 96 hotel motels that we would audit, or that could be audited, and the key measurement is we try and do about a quarter of them, or 25% a year. But because we couldn't get into a lot of them, we got into 18 out of those 96 in 2020. The good news is they're all open in 21. We're on track to hit that 25% goal. There are 5 new hotels in the county, which is also good because that would be more revenue coming in as well. The last key performance metric is to collect the delinquent real property taxes in accordance with the methods prescribed in state statute. That's PA 123. And what we do here is we account for 100% of those delinquent real property taxes every year. Some take a little bit longer to collect. Others, it's kind of it's a floating measurement because someone would go in delinquency on their first year, their second year they're into forfeiture, and the third year it's when we start the foreclosure process. So you're dealing with 3 different years and 3 different types of delinquent real property taxes. But what this graph shows, it's actually a good number. What this graph shows is the number of delinquent receipts year to year. You can see it's going down, which means if I get a delinquent receipt, it means someone hasn't paid their real property taxes in the county from the locals. So if less are coming in, that means people are paying their property taxes. So this is kind of a good trend. Hopefully 21 also looks like it's down as well. I think by 22 we may, I don't know, it's more of a personal prediction because of it's 2 years after COVID, we may start seeing some issues, but there's also some good news here when we get to some of the other slides that could actually help out those people that may be running into a crunch there. But any questions on the key performance metrics at all? Good. We'll go into some significant accomplishments.
Excuse me. Oh, we did have a question.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. No, you're all right. Commissioner LeGrand.
Thank you, Chair. I had a couple questions. When you say delinquent receipts processed, you don't mean paid? Do you just mean lodged with the county so that we?
Yeah, what happens after 1 year of non-payment to the locals, they turn over those delinquent property taxes to the county. We in turn write a check to everybody and make them whole so they can continue to perform their services, whether it's law enforcement, police, fire.
So process means we take them off.
We take them off
Yes.
there, and now we have them. So if there's less of them,
Right.
it means less people are going into default.
Right. So it doesn't mean satisfying those tax debts. It just means taking.
But if we have less of them, then that's good. Could there be one that's really big? Yeah, there could be. But it's usually a measurement to show that trend is going down. Less people are going into default.
Okay.
Businesses and people.
Great. Thank you.
Good. It was a good question. Some significant accomplishments. You can see that if you were here last year, Ken talked about how we were in the process of changing to use the over-the-counter online and mobile credit card and ACH payment options. And so we're almost through a whole year now of doing that. And right up as of, I think, end of October, we had about $4.3 million in credit card and online electronic payments, which I think under the circumstances with the pandemic is a great option for these people. I think our number one complaint in our office isn't that they have to pay. Everybody realizes that you have to pay for your property taxes. It's having to come downtown. We deal with people all parts of this county, and the parking. Finding a place, having to pay for parking. They always ask to get validated. We tell them we don't own the garage, we can't validate. And it's just a pain. So this is an awesome service. We have the notice on all the envelopes and all the statements. And this is almost 23% of our receipts in the first year, with not a lot of people knowing about it at this point. We did do a press release, but it's something that will gain momentum, and I think this is an awesome service for our citizens. And with that, by doing this transition, we think that it's also PCI compliant, which, if you don't know what that is, it's the data security standards that you have with credit cards and using those, that type of systems. And basically companies and institutions that follow and achieve the payment card industry data security standards are considered PCI compliant, and the county with these systems are PCI. It means we're secure. Of course, you all know this one probably should have been my first significant accomplishment, because it was my first time being involved with this, but this achievement, with the help from the finance team and the administrative and board leadership, we again maintain the AAA credit rating. So Kent County demonstrates extremely strong capacity to maintain principal stability and limit exposure to the principal loss due to our credit risks, and that's why we're AAA rated. I think you can read there at the bottom that, in addition to the thousands of dollars that it saves our county, and the many local units that borrow under this rating, and I even think the airport just did that, it sends a clear message not only to the taxpayers, but the community, and also future stakeholders that may want to work with Kent County. And it pretty much tells them that, this county is managed very, very well. Go look ahead. Getting close to the end here, so. Couple bullet points. We would like to, or I would like to, in my office, expand the credit card payment option and the PCI compliance security protocols to all the departments. Not every department is on the same system or the same platform. Some do it a little bit differently but this is going to take more than just the treasurer's office to do this. We're going to have to do it as a team with the different departments that take some sort of credit card, and the finance department and the administration to do this, but I think that's something that is achievable. The second bullet point talks about there was some new legislation in 2019 that had to do with 2019 and moving forward that could adversely affect the surplus proceeds from foreclosed properties. This was if any of you followed it, it was the Supreme Court case, the Raffaelli versus Oakland County. Still lots of lawsuits, still a lot of unanswered questions moving forward. In the past, the county used to take the excess proceeds from those surplus funds after we would sell property and sweep it into the general fund. Well, we really shouldn't be or can't be doing that quite yet anymore. And there's still a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of lawsuits that many townships, many regions, federal and local and circuit court lawsuits that are going on that the county is part of, and that's probably a separate meeting that we can have regarding that. But that's a big what if question there that I think this board or the larger Board of Commissioners will have to address here probably in the next 6 months or so. Again, myself and your leadership team may be presenting to you. But that's something that we need to kind of keep an eye on. And basically, in a nutshell, the issue has to do with those foreclosed surplus funds, and how we use them. If you want to talk more about that, we can, but I'm just going to move on 'cause for hours. And the third thing, and this is earlier in the slideshow, I talked about that there's some help on the way, especially for those that are coming into the 2022 foreclosure season. Through the ARPA money, there's a program called the Michigan Homeowners Assistance Fund, or MyHalf, and this is going to help out some of those delinquencies that may be happening with the property taxes. Does a whole lot more, but it's $242 million worth of help just for our state. If you compare this to Step Forward, if any of you remember Step Forward, that was about, I think, under $30 million worth of help. Almost 10 times more of that. So this will definitely help reduce delinquencies and forfeitures moving forward. So here, I won't go too deep into these. These are kind of some key collaborations. We partner with our local governments and investment pools. We deal with all 35 local tax collection units with settlement and making sure they're whole. Some of these home repair service, next steps, legal aid, these are areas that help us, that partner with us, whether it's for maintenance on properties, foreclosed properties, housing counseling, financial education. Legal aid helps out with those that are going through probate issues or estate issues. And of course, we team up with Kent County, the Community Action, and they help out providing resources and education too. And then of course the last one is the MISHDA, and they're going to be helping us out, I believe, through that MyHalf program that I just stated earlier, with funds to help out those who are going to be going into delinquency. With that, be more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your report and meeting our timing expectations. Well done. All right, yes, Commissioner Blackhout.
So thanks for that report, very good information. I just had a follow-up question on the Michigan Homeowner Assistance Funds that you said are coming from the government, the feds to Michigan. How much do you anticipate of that would come to Kent County? And then do you have an idea of the percentage of our delinquencies or defaults that may be eligible for those funds?
Well, like anything else with ARPA, the rules and the guidance is very vague so far. They had said that the money, this is how much money the state is going to get, and I stated that I think it's $242 million, and it's going to be run through MISHDA, like Step Forward was, and MISHDA has to write the rules and the protocol, and it needs to be approved by the feds. And they said that'd all be done by the last quarter in 2021. Well, we're in the middle of the last quarter of 2021, and we haven't gotten anything yet. So it probably won't be until I'm anticipating January. How much we get, I think it's going to be, I'm not sure if they're going to divide it up between the 83 counties or if they're just going to be as applied. I mean, there's so much money available for this program that it might just be those that can help out, like home repair services, or anybody that deals with HUD counseling will be able to help individuals out and apply for this money. So specifics, I don't have the specifics. Once I get them, I'll be more than happy to share them with you or with the board, so then you can let your constituents know if they have these problems. This is a resource you have. This is something that when we're dealing with our some of the people that come to our office that are struggling, we give them not only, here's the agency, it's home repair that's going to help you through this, here's their phone number, here's their contact, here's their website. You can even read about it on the Treasurer's website, MISHDA's website, but of course, it's not up and running yet, so I can't give you any details because I don't know what they are.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm not asking for details. I was just wondering if you had any idea, like how many, as far as the percentage of the delinquencies and defaults in Kent County, what does that look like? And, just trying to get an idea of how many people would be trying to access these dollars.
So if someone is 3, 4, 5 years in forfeiture, I don't know if it'll go back that far. We don't know yet. We don't know how liberal they're gonna be on their, how far you go back to use it. Can you use it only for 20 and 21? We're not sure. We have to, we just have to kind of wait. And hopefully we can help out all the people that are struggling, but there's gonna be some rails on there, and I just don't know what they are yet. Sorry. As soon as I know, I'll let the board know, and hopefully we can get that information to you, because we're chomping at the bits too. This is gonna be a great program, I think.
All right, thank you. So it would be helpful to know, though, like the percentage of, total receipts that are, related to delinquent accounts, because that's really what I'm trying to get at,
Okay.
is how many of our residents are struggling.
Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Stack. Welcome, Treasurer McGregor. Thanks for being here today. So, on the slide you went over credit card use. Is there a savings to the county by people doing it online, doing it at kiosks, and using their payment card to
There's
make?
no cost. The cost is to the person that uses that system.
Okay, so is there a savings that they're not going face-to-face with someone to do a transaction?
I don't believe there's a savings at all. It's more of a convenience option.
Okay, so what is the charge that we charge? I mean, when I renewed my license tab, I got charged $4 to the machine that I was using. There was a charge from the state of Michigan, and then a charge for using a credit card. And it just seems for someone that I think is given the county or the state money, that, some of these fees are starting to get outrageous. So I'm wondering, what is our fee?
Yeah, I think our fee, let me just double check.
2.35% for an over-the-counter transaction, 2.9% for an online transaction through the mobile application or their desktop. But if they pay by ACH, it's $1.25 no matter what. Most of the payments that we get are actually the ACH transactions.
Okay, thank you.
That's Steve Orchard, my deputy, for the record. Yeah, and Commissioner, that's a difficult question to answer in a way that makes everybody happy. We look at it that we don't want to cost our citizens more by providing this service. So we want to break even. And if someone feels that this convenience is worth paying that X amount, they can still come in and pay by check or cash, and there is not an additional charge. But if that convenience is worth the 2.3 or 2.9 or the $1.50 for an ACH, then that is paid by that individual and not by the rest of the taxpayers who aren't in delinquent real property default.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner LeGrand.
Thank you, Chair. I too agree that the credit card is a payment that's a wonderful step forward in convenience for people, and I'm glad we're doing it. I had just a question. The money that you talked about that we're sort of not sweeping into the general fund while we await the outcome of these court cases, can you give an approximation or an average what that would be to us in like the course of a year? How much money is
So
Is that-
last year, 2020, it was, I want to say, about $1 million right now.
okay? That's
When you, the last two foreclosure seasons is probably close to $1 million.
okay. Okay. sorry, looking back at my other questions I've written down. I'm going back to the hotel tax now. Can you just give me a little more detail on what a hotel audit means?
So, we have one individual in our office that meets with each hotel and reviews the books. And she does an audit on the rooms that are rented versus the dollars that they owe us. And so, takes some time to do each hotel. And basically, that is her job, is to audit, to make sure if there's 10 rooms rented, the fee for those rooms and any fee associated with those rooms that have to do with our lodging tax, it matches up appropriately. It's a little bit more in depth than that, but that's basically what that individual does. We have one FTE that visits all the hotels and reviews the room bookings.
Okay, interesting. And then I guess my last question goes back to the investments. The first, obviously, not losing any principal is important, of course.
Key,
We could
right.
put it under the mattress and have the same
Well,
result.
but that's rule number one, though. As going through Treasurer 101, County Treasurer 101, you do not want to be anything less than
Right.
100%.
Absolutely. But my question is on the general fund investment income, and what I'm looking for is what kind of percentage are we looking at? What kind of percentage yield? I'm sure it's very low.
Horrible percentage, yeah.
I'm sure it is, but
And Steve helps me out a lot on this, and we just talked about it last night. It was, I think he went, how many years? 5 years out I think he said 5 years out, correct me if I'm wrong, at like 2 basis points or 20 basis points, so less than 1% still. We're doing CDs and bonds, and it's anything that has zero risk of losing. And that's that SLY principle that we review when we go over the finances is safety is number one. And then liquidity. You have to be liquid because we have to balance that with our cash flow needs. The last thing, and always third, is yield. And if you get that upside down, that's when you go below 100% of
Right.
your principal. So it is so important. And yeah, it's the rates are not good right now in the guidelines of what I can invest in. State statute and our investment policy is very, very conservative.
thank you. No, I just wanted conceptually to know what
Yeah.
percentage we were looking at.
I mean, 10 basis points to 20 basis points is probably where we are, anywhere from 6 months to 5 years. It's not good.
The weighted average return on the entire pool is 40 basis points currently. If you were to buy a CD at a bank right now for 1 year, you get about 10 basis points. I think the 10-year treasury is at 1.5 basis points. There is no yield anywhere.
Right. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. Thanks, Chair.
Yep, thank you. Commissioner Skaggs.
Thank you, Chair. Several years ago, the Chair and I urged the last treasurer to collect the hotel motel lodging tax from Airbnb, and just wondered how that is going. Do we audit them? How's our relationship with them?
It's good. They're tough to audit because I think the agreement is with Airbnb corporate, and sharing the details it's almost, I kind of relate this to your issue you have with the mobile phone fee. You got to trust that they're going to pay you what they owe you. It's tough, the agreement. I wasn't here when the agreement was made, but the agreement I understand was through Airbnb Inc. But today, looks like as of the end of October, we were just under $300,000 in that hotel motel tax for Airbnbs. So I brought this just in case someone asked a question, and it's $291,299 that are just coming from Airbnb. I have the list of what we're getting from each hotel or motel, but that is actually a specific one. So, hopefully that answers your question.
So I guess to paraphrase President Reagan, we're forced to trust and we cannot verify. But does that sound like a reasonable number to you? I mean, are we taking a look
I
at
don't
how
know.
many
I have
Airbnbs are
nothing
in
to
the area?
compare it to because it's newer. It's gone up each year. In fact, we just got a bunch of checks that aren't even part of Airbnb in the mail the other day. And staff was saying, what do we do with these? And so we had to contact, they're in Colorado, I believe the entity was. I can't remember their name, but I can find that out if you need that detail. That just sent us checks. So people are realizing that there is a fee, a hotel motel tax here in Kent County, and this is a competitor to Airbnb. And so they sent us checks, but it's tough to say, it's tough to audit those at this time. I think as we learn more about how the system works, working with the administration and the finance department, we could probably tighten up that agreement with them. But it's something that I think might be worth reviewing again. I think it's been about 2 or 3 years since you've worked on that. But I will go back and see if I can't see what it's been over the past 2 or 3 years or since we've had that agreement with Airbnb. But you're also gonna run into the year of 2020, which is gonna be really off just
Right.
because of the pandemic.
So that's interesting that people are voluntarily complying. I guess the lawyers got to them. Because originally the contract for payment was just with Airbnb. So if we can get other short-term rental competitors also engaged, I think that's fair.
Yeah,
and-
I think these are legitimate businesses that want to play by the rules that
Right.
were made, and they don't want to get dinged if they ever get caught. I mean,
Right.
let's play by the rules so we don't run into these circumstances. So I think they're good community partners that are willing to, they're charging it, so you might as well pay it.
Great. Thank you, Pete.
Thank you. Anyone else? If not, I will jump on that bandwagon a little bit, because Commissioner Skaggs and I did put the squeeze on the last treasurer to do that. So, and I suspect VRBO is one of these other agencies that is collecting this or not collecting it. But the only way that we can actually get that effectively is if we go to the organization itself and then negotiate a contract so that they will collect the fee and then pay it on to us. Doing these on an individual homeowner basis is prohibitive. So I would encourage you to follow up on whether it's VRBO or the other comparable kinds of agencies. This certainly is the trend that we need to make sure we're making everyone pay their fair share. So following up on that, is there any current projections on where we're heading on our hotel motel tax? I assume we're trending up and getting back to
I'm
at
gonna
least
have to-
breaking even.
I'll probably have to get together with Experience Grand Rapids and review what trends they're seeing, and then we can calculate from there. Because everybody charges a different rate, and so everybody has different occupancy, and so it's something that I can make sure I follow up with Experience Grand Rapids. Hey,
And maybe Jeff can fill that in too, because,
or Jeff.
yeah, clearly if we don't have enough,
They outsource to him. Yeah, right.
if we don't have enough of that revenue, then it comes out of our pocket, so
Yeah,
where are
sorry
we?
to interrupt, but we're budgeting $8.5 million this year. It was $12 million back in 2019. I'm going off memory here, so they have bounced back considerably. I believe we collected around 5 in 2020, so they are up quite a bit. The last RevPAR report was up about 58% over last year, so things have rebounded, yes.
And what is our approximate break even, because we need to use those revenues to cover some bond costs and so on?
Yeah, so the bonds are right around $8 million right now annually, and then we pay, I think it's 17.75% to Experience GR as part of that, so it's gotta be right around $9.5 million this year, roughly, to break it.
We might have a little bit of a shortfall again this year.
Potentially, but we don't think so right now.
Oh, okay. Good, thank you. Any other questions for Peter? If not.
Or Jeff.
Or
Any other
Jeff.
questions for
Oh,
Jeff?
We can grab him anytime.
Yeah, I know. You can grab me anytime also.
All right, thank you so much
All
for
right.
your
No, I
presentation
appreciate
this
it.
morning,
Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
and to you. All right, next item, item 4, from the Sheriff's Office. Do you want to present this issue for us, Alan?
Sure. Action requested, recommend to the Board of Commissioners to amend the Kent County 911 plan to designate Rockford Ambulance as a secondary public service answering point in Kent County. Pursuant to PA 32 of 1986, the county adopted a final 911 service plan and has periodically amended the plan to designate public service answering points in Kent County. This amendment will add a third secondary public safety answering point to the plan. Rockford Ambulance provides emergency medical services and has requested to be designated as a secondary PSAP. This designation provides the authority for the call information, including the call location and number, to be provided automatically to Rockford Ambulance rather than requiring dispatchers to verbally relay information to Rockford Ambulance. Pursuant to Section 312 of the Act, the Kent County Board of Commissioners may amend the plan by resolution to designate the secondary PSAPs in Kent County. The following designations are recommended: addition of secondary PSAP, Rockford Ambulance.
All right, is there a motion to approve that amendment? It is moved, supported, and supported. Michelle, were you going to address this if we have questions, or? Okay. Our Sheriff, good morning.
Good morning, and just one point of clarification, because I'm sure that so Rockford Ambulance has been in place this whole entire time, but when we originally designated secondary PSAPs, they didn't have the equipment in place to receive what we call any alley information, which is the name and the location of where the call is coming from. So technologically, they couldn't receive it. They weren't designated in the plan. They've now contracted with another dispatch to do medical EMD, which the sheriff office or the city of Grand Rapids, neither of us do EMD. So they contracted for that service. This contractee has the equipment in place. So this is the last step that we would have to accomplish to be able to just transfer calls with the NELE information with it. There's no cost to us. There's technically no cost to the dispatch authority in this context. It's just a procedural requirement of the law.
So essentially brings them back into the system.
Yep.
Any questions, comments? Yes, Commissioner Skaggs.
So obviously, we have a commissioner who's engaged with Rockford Ambulance. Who are the other two PSAPs that are alluded to here?
Life Ambulance and AMR, American Medical Response, are the two others.
And those, so combined, those make the three that are in the consortium and
Yes.
the three big ones.
They provide for all of the ambulance services for Kent County.
Okay, great, thank you.
Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Stack. It was mentioned earlier about the fees that we collect for 911. I know that we've settled with two cell phone companies. Have we decided just to not pursue that anymore?
Well, I can answer to some extent. We haven't settled with any cell phone companies. We were aware of the fact that we were missing proceeds from some cell phone companies. It started anecdotally, where people noticed it wasn't on their bill. They reported it to the dispatch authority, and then there was an audit that was accomplished. That continues to be tracked, and the proceeds are coming in. In fact, they're coming in at a higher rate than what they were budgeted to be in. That means more people are buying cell phones and people are reporting it. But, just like the hotel motel tax for Airbnb, there's not a true audit that's feasible under the law. So until that, or if that's ever changed, that would be the only way to know. But that being said, they track with the companies and make sure that it, passes the make sense test on an ongoing basis, and we are collecting proceeds.
Okay. I don't think with our current makeup in Lansing that that's ever gonna happen, but did we have two cell companies that cut a sizable check to say, yes, we haven't been paying you?
I think there are a few smaller ones, but Sprint was involved in a specific conversation and follow-up, and that yielded a pretty large check of back proceeds. And then moving forward, they've been paying commiserate with what we would expect.
So certainly an important issue, but slightly off of the current amendment. But any other comments or questions? Yes, Commissioner LeGrand.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just curious about, we have 3 services that do this now. Is this direct access to the information? I mean, I understand it's obviously very good in terms of resolving an emergency, but is there any kind of competition that we are giving someone a leg up in like reaching customers, or is that, is that something that we need to be aware of or
That's
concerned about?
actually established through CHEMS. They have response areas that they agree to, and there's a process involved in that. We're not involved in that process, but they're already designated for the area. We're simply facilitating the dispatch.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yep.
All right, any other questions or comments? If not, those that support the motion say yes. Yes. Those that oppose say no. It is approved. Let's move to the next item, number 5, from the Health Department. Al?
Yes. Action requested, recommend to the Board of Commissioners to transfer funding from the Administrator's 2022 General Fund budget and appropriate to the 2021-22 Health Fund budget for a full-time animal shelter technician, a part-time clerk typist 2, and to convert a part-time public health nurse position to full-time status. The Health Department is requesting the following additional positions: an animal shelter technician at a cost of $60,141 to improve the capacity to care for an increased population of cats due to a lower prevalence of spays and neuters during the COVID-19 pandemic. A part-time clerk typist 2 at $21,957 to provide support for higher caseloads resulting from the addition of a nurse in the communicable disease unit. And conversion of a part-time public health nurse to full-time status, cost of $51,506 due to the expansion of immunization services to the South Clinic. It is also requested that $133,604 be transferred from the Administrator's 2022 General Fund budget and appropriated to the 2021-22 Health Fund budget. These requests were approved by the Finance and Physical Resources Committee on November 16, 2021. This request is contingent on the approval of these positions by the Legislative and Human Resources Committee and the full board adoption of the 2022 General Appropriation Act.
Is there a motion to support?
So moved.
It is moved. Are you going to make a motion? Need a second first? Seconded? Right. Moved and supported. Yes, Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to divide the question here and consider the animal shelter technician separate from the other 2.
Motion to divide the question by separating out the first position relative to the animal shelter technician. Is there support for that motion? It is moved and supported. It is non-debatable. All those that support the motion to divide the question say yes.
Yes.
Opposed say no. It is divided. So let's first then take up the motion relative to the animal shelter technician. Any further discussion or comments? Yes, Commissioner Coleman.
Thank you, Chair. So on this one, I will disclose that I am allergic to cats, and so that may influence my perspective here. I also am well aware on my personal property of the increasing population of cats problem, but I just wonder if $60,000 to support more cats is a good expenditure. But I do have a just tactical question about, so with the budget approval from last week or whenever that was, is this $60,000 in that budget?
Yeah.
Why are we working on this separately, and why the transfer from general fund to health fund?
Okay, good questions, and I did explain this right at the beginning of LHR of finance when this came up. So we've been a little bit off kilter with the position request process this year. Part of it is when I started and they held all the requests until I got here and then I reviewed them and we got off the normal cycle. So that was one piece of it. So what we did is we included enough money in contingency to pay for the position, so they are in the budget, but wanted to approve these in this fiscal year, but not before the budget because of the extra work it would have created to actually change all the budget documents before budget adoption. And then when you looked at the time remaining in the year, we are a little off our normal cycle. Usually these go to LHR first, and then they go to finance and then the board. Well, in this case, they went to finance first and then LHR after the board. So we're not anticipating this will be the case next year, and we think there were just extenuating circumstances as to why it happened this way this year.
Any follow-up? All right, Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Steck. So my comments are to basically both of them, now that we've split the question. And I've always been the kind of elected official that thinks the smaller we are, the more efficient we are. And the health department is one of our two largest expenditures. Do we ever look at departments and say, it's getting too big, it's starting to affect the effectiveness and the responsiveness of our services, and look at a different way of doing that? And I think everyone's example would be is we're now in the fourth wave of a virus. And some of the problems we had in the first wave, we're still having now. People can't get tests. They're getting misinformation. They're looking for a rapid test. They call Spectrum, and Spectrum is saying, nope, those are really not effective. In fact, most of the time they're, inaccurate. So they're flooded with all this, and this is, we're in the fourth wave. I thought we would have at least straightened all of that out, but that's probably true with a lot of, the departments. You look at the scope of the animal shelter and the scopes of other departments. It just seems like it's almost getting too big to provide responsive services to the community. And I think we should look deeply at the possibility of how departments are set up in this county and how we can do things better for taxpayers.
Commissioner LeGrand.
Thank you, Chair. I hope that there's someone who can speak to the animal shelter question, because although I actually rather like cats, I too find this kind of a big price tag for a lot of cats. Is this literally was there a need before, and was this the straw that broke the camel's back, or are we literally just taking care of pandemic cats?
Good morning. I'm Gail Brink, the Finance Director at the Health Department. Yes, you're exactly right. This actually was an issue prior to COVID. Back in 2019, we engaged public sector consultants to do a study of animal shelters. And in that study, it came out that Kent County was the second lowest in staffing per 100,000 residents. And there were like seven different counties that were reviewed in that study. And so when you look at everything that the animal shelter technicians do, from intake to caring for the animals to all of that, based on our census in there, we just don't have enough staff to provide the proper care for the animals, and that came out in that study. Then that was exacerbated with COVID because we paused spay and neuters for stray cats. And then when you pause that for a year and you think a cat can have up to 5 litters in a year, how many more cats that brought in? And as Commissioner Coleman said, he's seeing more cats around in his neighborhood. That's probably true. So so that was like the straw that broke the camel's back, as you said, that we needed additional staff. And unfortunately, the increase in cats that were created from COVID, that's not something, it might have been a year pause on spay and neuters, but it's going to take many years to get that population back under control. So, does that answer your question?
That helps, yes, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Commissioner Hennessy.
So you're adding a full-time person because you've got cats that aren't spayed, aren't taken care of. So why aren't we putting money into taking care of the cats and the production problem with them?
Well, we are, and it's not just cats, the other, the flip side of that is dogs too. During COVID, a lot of people adopted dogs because they were working at home. And so then when they returned to work, we had a significant increase in the dogs returned to the shelter as well. So it's not just cats, I want to make that clear, it's cats and dogs. But the cat, we're implementing other programs as well, like Working Cats is where we are putting some of these stray cats in barn facilities or large facilities. So we're looking at lots of things to reduce it. But, and we're back doing spay and neuters, but it still takes time to reduce that population.
Just generally, once you add a position, sort of following up on what Commissioner Ponstein was saying, once you add a position, that position and all the costs for it are there forever. And, if there are other means of taking care of the problem that don't add annual costs and lifetime costs for the employee in terms of pensions and that type of thing, I'm a little, our old policy was sort of like no new staff. And I really seriously wonder about all these new staff positions and whether we've really looked at all the other means that we could take care of it. And it's certainly something that's come about because of the pandemic. So are there any other funds that are available to put this, on more of a temporary basis or what have you?
Well, and like I said before, it really was a problem prior to COVID. So it's not just a COVID problem. We were understaffed in the shelter related to the care for animals based on the census we have on any particular day. We have probably 40 dogs and 50 cats, and they need to be cared for. So that was identified as a problem prior to COVID. And when you look at the other health department, or the other animal shelters that were reviewed in that study, and I think it was like Macomb, Livingston, Washtenaw, Oakland. There were several of them in there. We were the second lowest in the staffing. In fact, we were probably about 2 FTEs lower than the others per 100,000 residents. So it really is, we don't have enough staff to care for the census. So, if we didn't add staff, we would have to reduce the census of animals in the shelter, because we can't, if we don't properly care for them, they will get sick. There's lots of issues that happen because of that. So really, like I said, it was a problem that existed prior to COVID. It just became much more urgent because of the increase in animals coming in.
And this is the only way in which you can meet the need, is to add this one position to the general fund.
To care for the animals, yeah, we need, it takes a person to clean the kennels, and they take they do all the intake, they do adoptions, these staff are doing all the care for the animals that are there on a daily basis. So outside of a person doing that, I don't know what other options there would be to, have somebody cleaning kennels or whatever. So if we didn't have staff, we would have to contract with somebody to come in to clean kennels. So that would be a cost in addition. And we feel that it's less expensive to have a staff person than to contract out that cleaning cost.
Have you really looked at what those, have you really looked at what those costs might be between contracting and hiring staff?
In fact, we have done, during COVID, we had to do some contracting, and we did use COVID dollars, and it is very expensive. I think Al Jano can probably speak to that, because he assisted us in finding a contract staff to come in and clean the kennels during COVID.
Commissioner McLeod. Excuse me, Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for that information. So it sounds like that this position, from what you said, this is just one of many positions that you actually need according to the consultant survey back in 2019, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
If you look at their recommendation, they recommended at a minimum of 2,
Right.
Potentially 3 additional staff to assist in the shelter care for the animals.
Okay.
And we are requesting 1 because we're trying to do that along with some other programs and that goes, and it's possible that we may have to come back and ask for additional staff as well.
Okay. And I just wanted to say that I definitely appreciate the shelter. We got our dog there a few years ago, and, you know, he's great, so we definitely appreciate it. So the only thing I would ask is that if this position is not just to care for cats, that we clarify that in this proposal, so that it doesn't appear as you know, like it did to us, like we need a whole position for cats, but it's actually for all the animals there. So I'd just like to see if we could clarify that. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, we will.
Further comments or questions on this motion? Yes, Commissioner Coleman.
Just given that the motion itself that we're presented with to vote on doesn't address any of these more kind of expansive factors, to borrow Commissioner LeGrand's phrase, this is about pandemic cats. I'm going to be a no about that, but I'd be happy to consider a future action request that's takes into account those larger studies and stuff that we didn't have in this particular request.
All right, any other questions or, yeah, Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you, Chair Steck. So I'll just clarify, no criticism of the animal shelter. I mean, when I first got elected, I was very critical about our kill rates. And what we have done to correct that problem is outstanding. This is, another example of this, just the size and scope of the health department. I'm not being critical of any one department, but when we get the performance measurements for the health department, sometimes we hear about the animal shelters, sometimes we don't. There's a lot of issues, one of them, and I'm glad you brought it up, because during the pandemic, I rescued a dog. Sorry I didn't get it here. I got it from Nashville, Tennessee, but it's still a dog. But yeah, I saw the volume of people walking dogs, and I'm starting to see that that's not happening anymore, and the dump back is begun. And I think maybe a public service announcement is that, rescuing a dog or adopting a dog isn't for just a pandemic. It's for the life of the dog, and you're coming up on the holidays where people like to dump too. So, there's a lot of issues, and for us as commissioners to try to take everything in from the health department when there's individual departments that I think should be separated from immigration and vaccines and immunizations and all of that. I mean, they're completely different things, and they're all lumped into one very large governmental unit. So thank you for all your work. No criticism. I'm an animal lover. I don't appreciate that the Humane Society doesn't take pit bulls, and yet that's what our majority is. And there's nothing wrong with that breed either. So thank you.
All right, anything else on the motion? What's before us is, yeah, Commissioner
And
LeGrand.
just a quick clarification. Are we saying that what goes to the board will not refer to the pandemic cats, but will refer to the audit that recommended a number of full-time positions? If we approve this now, are we saying this is the language that has to go to the board, or should we fix the language now?
My understanding is that the motion is to approve an additional position for an animal shelter technician at the cost of $60,000, and that technician has been explained this morning to include more than just dealing with cats. That articulation or clarification would then go to the full board if we do approve this.
Thank you.
If nothing else, all right, technically you only get two, but I will give you one more, Commissioner Coleman.
I'm just trying to just understand, so by what mechanism are we sending that additional information in this particular motion on the animal shelter technician?
Well, my understanding is that the technician is intended, we're not changing the intent. The intent all along has been to provide services beyond just responding to the cats. And so I read this to be nothing more than a expansion of the explanation for what the technician would be doing.
Are we trying to amend the language now so that it reflects that? Or I guess I'm just confused
I don't
about-
think it needs to be amended unless this committee is taking the position that a technician that's hired, if it is approved, may only do this function, that function, or that function. I don't think we've technically or historically done that, but I think that the explanation for what the technician would be expected to do has some fluidity to it, some flexibility to it.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Hennessy.
So one of the things I've just heard is, this is a request right now. We're still below what 7 other counties do and have available in terms of staffing, and that there may be further requests. I'm kind of objecting. I don't like the idea that we're piecemealing this. We've got this request now for this thing, but there may be these other requests coming through. I mean, I'd like more of a comprehensive look. We've got all of these, individual positions, and we're not getting that comprehensive look at what's coming down the pike. And what are we going to need a year, 2 years, 3 years from now? At least an estimate, an idea. And that's sort of where I'm having trouble with many of these requests today.
I'll ask our administrator to respond to that if you can.
Yeah, we're going to be taking a comprehensive look at the animal shelter operation. I would view this as kind of an emergency Band-Aid. I think it's pretty clear, not only from the study that's been done, I've had a number of conversations with others that speak of conditions and a whole number of details, I think, about like how often the dogs get out on weekends and all that kind of thing. I think it's pretty clear we're short-staffed, and we could actually probably justify add more right now. So I would consider this more of an emergency stopgap. We'll be taking a thorough look. I mean, I think we need to look at the total organization of it, as Stan suggested. Do we have it located in the best place? All those kinds of things would be a comprehensive review.
So I did open the door for 3 shots at this, so any other comments or questions? If not, all right, I will call the question on the motion to approve an animal shelter technician. All those that support the motion say yes.
Yes.
Those that oppose the motion say no. I conclude that the motion did pass. All right, let's take the second part of that under the division, and that is approval of the other 2 positions, the clerk typist and the public health nurse. Any questions or comments with respect to? Yeah, I think technically it was already moved before we divided the question, so we don't do this a lot, but I believe what happens is we just take 2 votes on it. It doesn't need a new motion, so. But I would allow more conversation with respect to those 2 positions if there is anything. If there is not, all those that support this portion of the divided question say yes.
Yes.
Those that oppose say no. Second part is also approved. All right, let's move to the next item on our agenda, coming from the Sheriff Probate Court. Al?
Yes, action requested. Recommend to the Board of Commissioners to transfer funding from the Administrator's 2022 General Fund budget to the Sheriff 2022 General Fund budget for an Office Administrator, 2 Clerk 3 positions, 3 Corrections Officers, and 1 Patrol Deputy, and to the Probate Court 2022 General Fund budget for 2 Clerk 3 positions and to convert 2 part-time Clerk 2 positions to full-time status. The Sheriff is requesting the following additional positions: an Office Administrator at $83,605, and 2 Clerk 3 positions at $134,116 to manage and process an increased volume of video-based Foia requests resulting from the implementation of body cameras, a Corrections Officer at $88,723, and a Patrol Deputy, $88,723, to provide staff training in areas such as de-escalation and unconscious bias mitigation. 2 Corrections Officers at $177,446 to meet increasing demands to provide court security. The Probate Court is requesting to add 2 Clerk 3 positions at $134,116 and convert 2 part-time Clerk 2 positions to full-time status, $67,060, to address increasing caseloads as recommended by an analysis from Plant and Moran. It is also requested that $572,613 be transferred to the Sheriff's 2022 General Fund budget and $201,176 to the Probate Court's 2022 General Fund budget from the Administrator's 2022 General Fund budget. These requests were approved by the Finance and Physical Resources Committee on November 16, 2021. These requests are contingent upon the approval of these positions by Legislative and Human Resources Committee and the full board adoption of the 2022 General Appropriation Act.
All right, is there a motion to approve this? It is moved, it is supported. Any discussion? Yes, Commissioner LeGrand.
I have a very simple question, which is, I assume that when we say 2 clerk, 3 positions at 134,000 and change, that is the combined amount for those 2 clerks, not 2 clerks who are getting that each.
I believe that's correct, but is there anyone here that can respond to that, Amy?
Yes. Yeah.
That is correct.
I want to make sure I understand. Thank you.
Further questions or comment? Commissioner Skaggs.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if the sheriff could give us a little more details on the patrol deputy that's going to provide the training. Is that training just to patrol deputies? Is it also to corrections officers? And just a little more details on that.
Right, so historically, our training staff has been comprised of a lieutenant that coordinates the division, a sergeant that assists in delivering training, and 2 deputies. And so they're combined are responsible for the certification responsibilities of all 700-ish members of the Kent County Sheriff's Department, and those are very diverse depending on what role you play at the Sheriff's Office. They are augmented by individuals who have an expertise in particular training modules, who work in the training unit as a part-time basis, and then their original assignment is backfilled on overtime. So you might be a defensive tactics person. You would be brought in to do the defensive tactics training for the period of time necessary. And then instead of working your normal road patrol position, we would fill that with overtime. So in combination of all the new training requirements or initiatives would be a better way to put it, that backfill load became very heavy for us to try to continue to do. And in addition, the technical training that we needed to send officers to be qualified to be the trainer got more and more difficult for us to accommodate a large number of part-time trainers. So the full-time positions actually happened last year in that I pulled in people to really accommodate some of the larger needs we had for de-escalation, unconscious bias, among many, many others. On a side note, we have an unprecedented number of retirements, which then requires an unprecedented number of new hires. I've had 102 sworn officers hired so far in 2021, which all requires orientation, field training, coordination, and training. So there's a very heavy training load. So it really is not new cost so much as an exchange for overtime cost for full-time cost. And again, we're always keeping an eye on what's the most efficient way to do that. Financially, it's most efficient to have full-time officers in this role. Technically, it's more efficient to have full-time officers in this role. And practically, I'm having a very difficult time getting officers to want to work these oppressive number of overtime hours. So for all reasons, it is better for our organization to do this with full-time officers. Did I answer your question?
It very much does. Thank you, Sheriff.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Hennessy.
Thank you. I appreciate the administrator. I put questions in writing and received answers and responses from him and from you, Sheriff, and I appreciate that. But one of them that I found interesting is just generally Foia use is increasing, and I'd like to have you talk just about the increased use of Foia, what the body cams mean, and how this is all going to be coordinated.
Right. Great question. And I think you guys probably all remember, those of you that were here when we talked about implementing a body camera process, that there would be some ramifications in the Foia world for that. And I very clearly answered that. I don't have a finite number of what that load looks like. We have a mechanism put in place initially, and over the course of this year, we have been counting and documenting and associating the number of hours spent on Foia so that we could come back and have this very conversation. But really specifically, and I'm going to give you like a domestic incident, right, where our minimum response is 2 officers. Sometimes it's 3, depending on how much of jeopardy there is on the call. And they might be there for an hour and a half, let's say, until they get that scene cleared up. Well, in order to meet the FOIA request for all reports and videos and recordings for this incident, that FOIA coordinator not only has to watch every officer's camera, they have to redact every officer's camera. So if you're in a home and there's personal information laying about, there's things that by law we can't release because it's PII. So it's a very time-intensive process to get this video ready to go. And then I used a very simple, domestic assault. Now think about that in terms of like a large scene where there might be 4 or 5 officers that are responding. It exponentially gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and our office is incredibly busy in terms of number of calls for service. So it's not only just body cam, it's in-car cameras. We've put substantial additions of video in the jail, which all works really well for our reliability. But on the same token, this video all has to be reviewed. So I have historically used a combination of sworn staff, law enforcement, corrections, and this is going to a non-sworn staff who will become experts in FOIA. But it's a big transition for our department. I think this is the right size. It will be for next year. I don't expect that there would be a substantial increase, but there will probably be incremental increases in FOIA as we continue to see this roll out.
Yes, go ahead.
As a follow-up, I think you said there'd be about, $15,000 that would be reimbursed through the fees. I know we have a FOIA policy for paying by the page. Do we have a policy in place? Do we, for how we charge on this kind of expense?
The existing FOIA policy does cover staff time, so the staff time is already in that calculation, in addition to, if you will, the paper copies. So that, yes, so that the officers or the staff at the Sheriff's Department or in my office or in any other department, we can bill for the staff time itself.
So what kind of an estimate then would we really have on what we can be reimbursed from what our actual costs are versus, if the person's working specifically on FOIA, wouldn't they conceivably have most of their salary then reimbursed?
We get thousands and thousands and thousands of FOIA requests every year. We bill for a very small number of them because most of them can be turned around almost instantly. When we get a complicated FOIA, like the sheriff was talking about, whether it's the domestic that has 3 hours of body cam, plus the dash cam, plus the 911 calls, plus the intake at the Sally Port because somebody did go to jail. Now we're talking about a significant amount of material to go through. What happens when we get that request is the sheriff's office looks at it and says, I have all of these different pieces to go through. They make a good faith estimate as to how much time it will take to go through it all. They provide that estimate of expense to the requester in advance. And the requester has to put in a deposit, has to agree to the amount. Then we let the staff go to actually compile everything. So not knowing exactly whether somebody's going to say, you know what, I don't want all that. And that's frequent. We get FOIA requests that arguably you could load a semi with. And when we tell the requester, did you understand that you just requested 50,000 pages? A lot of times they didn't. And then they will come back and go, no, actually all I want is the contract between Commissioner Hennessy and Commissioner Coleman. That's really it. I didn't want every contract the county executed. So we have those conversations with our requesters on a very regular basis. That type of exchange is not billed to the requester. That's staff time that we give to make sure we're giving good responses to those requesters.
There are also another number of other things, like discovery would be a great example, where these same people are processing information and there's no allowance to charge for it. So only a very small percentage of our cost is recouped under the FOIA law, the way as written. But as written, it's applied. So if we can recoup it, we do.
If you can clarify, the receipts that we do receive in billing for FOIA, I assume the numbers here are not net of those receipts. Those receipts get accounted for elsewhere.
Correct.
When we get a check from a requester, it goes back to the department whose staff did the work. But it doesn't necessarily offset a particular person's wages.
So, and the number that you're seeing in this request is the projected increase in revenue, not the revenues in its entirety. So,
Commissioner McLeod, is your hand up or you scratching your hand? Okay. Thank you. Commissioner LeGrand.
Thank you, Chair. I should have asked this earlier, but the two corrections officers to meet increasing demands on court security, can you speak to that a moment? I mean, I know that trials have been slow to start up this year, so what does this represent exactly?
well, it's in part going to have an improvement on our ability to meet services because of COVID, but these were projected as part of your courthouse build-out long before COVID hit and took us all off our feet. So every time there's a court that is simultaneously in session, I have the requirement of 2 more deputies to be inside that court. So it really has to do with how many places we can be at the same time. There is some other work associated with an extra court going on at the same time, and that would be bringing additional inmates down, the supervision of those inmates, and obviously the transport back and forth to the courtroom, some security issues related to more people coming in, but the biggest factor has to do with how many simultaneous places the staff have to be. So that's why it was planned, and now it's coming to fruition that we need to have this staff here.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I do have one follow-up before you slip away. That's, how many times do our FOIA responses get challenged?
Oh, so I would be swagging that answer, and I'm willing to do that for you, but there are documentation available that we'd be able to get. But it's usually we're able to answer in part, so there's not a full denial.
It's going to give you 2 easy choices. Is it infrequent or is it frequent?
In between.
Okay.
So denied in part is a very common thing. We have to redact some information. It's pretty infrequent.
But the recipient may just accept that redaction.
Yeah, of course.
And I assume a lot of these are criminal defense counsel that are
We don't go to court hardly ever on it, so we usually come to a resolution we're comfortable with.
Okay, that's what I wondered.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, all those that support this motion say yes.
Yes.
Those that oppose say no. It is approved. Thank you. Next item is miscellaneous. Does any commissioner have a miscellaneous item to raise? Commissioner Ponstein.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Steck. So I just wanted to thank everyone that emailed me, dropped me a call, and I appreciate it. Having a relative die is never really expected, but my mother lived a long life, and I just appreciate all the kind thoughts and comments and cards that were sent. So thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else with a miscellaneous item? Yes, Commissioner Coleman.
Given that it's Thanksgiving week, I just want to express, my thankfulness. I'm thankful for the blessings of family and friends, and thankful to get to work with everyone in this room. I'm thankful for any day where Commissioner Skaggs quotes Ronald Reagan, and I'm even thankful for cats.
Well, that doesn't leave much for the rest of us, does it? Anyone else? If not, I just have one small item. If the chairs of the interview teams can just check in with me after we're done with this meeting briefly. I know that you have some other meetings scheduled afterwards, but that'd be great. Other than that, thank you all. Enjoy your time off, and have a great Thanksgiving, and we'll see you later. We are adjourned.